R. Kelly, man. Dare I say a Chicago legend. Just kidding. Anyways, R. Kelly, born in 1967 in the Ida B. Wells projects, he grew up in a world where survival required both musical talent and street smarts. By his teens, he was busy on the L train, honing the voice while absorbing the city's ruthless dynamics. Chicago's underground R&B scene of the 1980s was a breeding ground for hustlers where young artists traded innocence for industry connections. Kelly's first group, the Mighty Poppers, scraped by playing local talent shows and church events. But his real education came from watching how power operated in the shadows. When he broke through with public announcement in the early 90s, Chicago's music scene embraced him, but whispers followed. At just 24, he met 12-year-old Aaliyah Houghton at an audition, and within 3 years, he'd illegally married her. The paperwork was forged, the ceremony rushed, but Chicago's music elite turned a blind eye. Engineers at CRC Studio on the South Side later admitted they saw underage girls coming and going. But in an industry built on exploitation, no one spoke up. Even after Aaliyah's family settled quietly, Kelly's stardom kept rising. Chicago media avoided the story, afraid to tarnish a hometown success. By the time I Believe I Can Fly became an anthem in 1996, Kelly had already established his pattern. Recording studios became hunting grounds, and his Bronzeville compound turned into a fortress for manipulation. The city's segregation, which has always been a problem, played a role. Police ignored what they dismissed as black celebrity drama, while poverty made young girls easy targets. His freak parties at the Cotton Club were infamous, with limos ferrying teenagers away after midnight. Chicago gave him impunity, and in return, he built an empire on their silence. R. Kelly didn't need weapons to control women. He weaponized their dreams. Survivors described a calculated grooming process. First, he'd approach them at malls, high schools, or even his own concerts, offering studio time or mentorship. Once isolated, the psychological conditioning began. He demanded they call him daddy, framing himself as their only path to success. Former assistants recall him a black book of victims, ranking them by compliance. That's fucking crazy, bro. Those who resisted were punished, locked in rooms, deprived of food, or forced to watch others get preferential treatment. His Chicago studio became a prison. Girls were forbidden from leaving without permission, their phones confiscated. He enforced strict rules. No eye contact with outsiders, no speaking unless spoken to, and absolute loyalty. Survivors say he used religion to justify abuse, quoting Bible verses while demanding sexual sacrifices. The more trapped they felt, the more he convinced them the outside world had abandoned them. And for those who threatened to leave, blackmail. Countless victims described being recorded during intimate acts, with Kelly warning he'd release the tapes if they ever spoke out. The cult mentality extended to his inner circle. Bodyguards, producers, and even some family members allegedly helped cover his crimes, dismissing accusers as groupies. In Chicago, where Kelly was untouchable, victims were terrified to go to police, especially when he flaunted his connections to judges and politicians. By the 2000s, his system was airtight. Recruit, isolate, control, and discard. And for decades, it worked. Because Chicago let it. The truth about R. Kelly wasn't a secret. It was an open joke. In 2002, Dave Chappelle mocked him on national TV. R. Kelly peed on a girl. The audience howled, but no one intervened. Chicago's music scene treated his crimes as gossip, not allegations. Even after the infamous sex tape surfaced in 2002, featuring a girl prosecutors alleged was as young as 14, Kelly's career barely stumbled. Jive Records stood by him. Radio stations kept playing his music, and fellow artists from Jay-Z to Diddy, oh man. collaborated with him for years, man. Behind the scenes, though, payoffs and legal threats kept victims silent. Chicago's court system, man, you know it's rigged. They move slow, too, with delays blamed on lost evidence and suddenly unavailable witnesses. Survivors who did come forward were smeared as gold diggers, while Kelly's defense team painted him as a target of racist persecution. The industry's complicity wasn't just passive, it was profitable. Kelly's tours sold out, his albums went platinum, and executives shrugged off the rumors as personal drama. Y'all remember the Me Too movement? Well, that's what it took to break R. Kelly's little cycle he's going in here. In 2017, Kenya Barnes and Oronike Odole launched Mute R. Kelly, demanding accountability. But even then, the Chicago courts resisted. Concert venues initially ignored protests, and some fans offended him with the same old refrain: separate the art from the artist. It wasn't until the 2019 Surviving R. Kelly docuseries that the dam truly broke. And even then, his conviction felt less like justice and more like a reckoning Chicago had delayed for 30 years. By 2021, the system that protected R. Kelly finally failed him. Federal prosecutors bypassing Chicago's corruptible courts charged him under racketeering laws, the same statutes used to take down mob bosses. Survivors like Lizette Martinez and Dominique Gardner testified in harrowing detail, describing how he ruled them through fear, starvation, and brainwashing. The trial revealed the full scope of his operation: secret stashes of cash, burner phones to contact minors, and a network full of enablers who facilitated his abuse. When the guilty verdict came, it wasn't just a legal defeat. It was the collapse of an empire built on Chicago's silence. The man who once sang "I Believe I Can Fly" was sentenced to 30 years in prison, ensuring he'd die behind bars. But the damage couldn't be undone. Generations of survivors bore the scars of his manipulation, while the city that created him struggled to reconcile its role. Chicago had given R. Kelly everything: fame, power, and protection. And in return, he showed the world his darkest underbelly.
Fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this.